Hi everyone, this is Gina. Today I'm going to show you how to make this really cute little crystal flower bracelet. I'm not sure what I'm going to call it yet, but it's a basic right angle weave that we just embellish it a little bit differently than you usually see them embellished, and it turns into this cute little flower. Let me put this on my wrist so you can see it, and this is what it looks like. It's just really an adorable little bracelet. I'm going to back off a little further too, so you can kind of get the idea of what it looks like from a distance a little bit, like that. And then let's look at the whole thing again. This turns out really cute. This is a very simple process. It can be slightly a little bit more advanced than a basic right angle weave, simply because of the way we embellish it. However, if you just watch carefully and you go about it slowly, it's simple enough to figure out once it's in your hand. So this is what this looks like. We're going to go ahead and look and see what it takes to make this particular project, and we'll get started. Okay, for this project today, we are going to be using seed beads. I am using Toho brand seed beads, and I am using an 8-0, an 11-0, and a 15-0 in antique bronze. I am also going to be using some 3x2 millimeter Rondelle crystals, and this one is periwinkle, I believe, and a toggle clasp. So I'm using a rather small toggle clasp. It's probably about a 1/2 inch, just because this weave is small and I don't want a huge clasp. You can use any clasping you want, of course. I'm going to be using 6-pound Fireline, and I'm going to be using it in the smoke color because my beads are dark, and this can look kind of thready if you used a really light thread with these dark beads. So I'm going to be using the Smoke Fireline in 6-pound, like I said. I'm using a size 12 beading needle, and I am putting onto my beading needle about 4.5 to 5 feet. You will need to extend your Fireline during this project, and there will be a link to a video in the description box beneath the video player that will show you how to do that if you do not know how. So that's what we're going to be using. Go ahead and gather your things together and let's get started. Okay, to start this project, we are going to pick up 4 8-0 seed beads onto our needle. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up my 4 8-0 seed beads. This is essentially a right angle weave project that is embellished. So we're going to start with 1 unit of right angle weave, which consists of 4 beads. So we have put 4 on, brought it down to the end of the thread. You don't have to leave a long tail, but you do need enough to hold on to and tie a knot with. And then you're going to go back through the first bead that is on your thread, the one closest to the tail, and then draw your thread through until you can pull your beads together like this. Then we're going to sew back through the entire unit. So I'm coming out here. I'm going to hold on to my beads because they're loose at this point between my thumb and my finger. I'm going into the first bead and draw it through and pull on it, then go through the second or the next bead, and then the bead after that. Now I have my tail and my working thread together, and I'm just going to cross my working thread over the tail and then put the tail through the loop that results twice, and pull a knot down between the beads like this and get you in just a little closer. And now I'm going to sew through this unit again just to make sure everything is nice and secure. So my knot is here, that's where my thread is. I'm going to go into the next bead. And I'm doing 1 bead at a time simply because I want to keep the shape of my unit. So I'm going into the next one, and then into the next one, and the one after that. Now I'm going to go into the bead my tail is coming out of. So what I've got here is I've gone all the way around. My working thread is coming out of this side of the bead and my tail out of the other. I'm going to cut the tail down a little bit just to get it out of my way, but I'm going to leave enough of a tag in case I have any slippage, which I shouldn't at this point, but just in case. Then I'm going to pick up two 11-0 seed beads and an 8-0 onto my needle like this. I'm going to set this down and drop these beads down to it. And then I am going to pick up my clasp. So I'm going to pick up the round end of my clasp and I'm going to go through the loop on it. Drop it down to my beads. And then I'm just going to go through the 8-0 seed bead. So I'm going right underneath the clasping into the 8-0 and just the 8-0. Hold on to that 8-0 and pull my thread through until I draw the clasp down to the 8-0 seed bead, just like this. Now we need to pick up two more 11-0 seed beads and go into the opposite side of the bead that we're attaching to. So that will be the side that the tail is coming out of. And I'm just going to go into it and pull this down. Now, this is what I have, and I'm going to sew through it a couple of times just to make sure that it's nice and secure. So I'll show you how to do it once. We'll go off camera and do it one more time and then come back. So we're coming out of this 8-0 seed bead here. Let's go into these two 11-0s, into the 8-0 above them, and into the clasp, just like this. I'm going to hold on to my piece, pull my thread through. Then I'm going to go back down into the 8-0 again, and the two 11-0s on the other side, pull through, and then I'm going to go through the bead where the tail is here. Now, we've secured it once. Go ahead and do that 1 to 2 more times, depending on how secure you want it, and we will be right back. Okay, so now you should have something that looks like this. And it's nice and secure, and we're coming out of the bead here that we attached the clasping attachment to, and we're going to go down into the bead right next to where our thread is coming out of. We're going to work down to the bottom bead in this unit. So if I'm holding it this way, the bottom bead is towards me here, and I'm going to go into that one. Then I'm going to make 2 more units of right angle weave. So each unit has 4 beads in it. We're sharing this one that's already on the unit, so you pick up 3 and go into the opposite side of the bead. And that's how you make your next right angle weave unit. Now we need to secure this unit by sewing back through it. So we're coming out of the attaching bead, we go into the side bead, then we go into the bottom bead, 1 bead at a time to keep your nice little shape here. Go into the next bead. I hold on to them just so I can give a little tug and tighten them up. And then I go into the top bead. Again, I'm going to cover it, give it a little tug, straighten out my unit. And now I'm completely reinforced and attached. Now I need to go down to this bottom bead to make my next unit. So I'm going to go through the side and then into the bottom bead here. And again, pick up 3 more 8-0 seed beads and go into the opposite side of the bead I'm coming out of, just like this, and pull this down. Now I need to sew back through this unit. So 1 bead at a time, I'll cover it with my thumb and my finger and give a little tug and then go into the next one, just like this, cover it again, pull, go into the next one, cover it, pull, and then into the attaching bead. And I have now made a complete unit of right angle weave. Now, with this particular weave, we're going to work through 3 at a time. So what I need to do is work my way to the bottom, so as I do my embellishments, I can work my way back up to the 2 I've already created. So I'm going to go down into this side bead here. and I'm going to go into this bottom bead of my last unit here. Then I'm going to pick up an 11-0 seed bead, and I am going to just cross into the opposite bead on the opposite side. So this bead right here is what I'm coming out of. The one directly opposite of it is here. I'm coming out of this side of the bead. I'm going to go in a diagonal and go into the opposite side of the opposite bead and pull this 11-0 seed bead down into place, just like this. Now I am going to pick up a 15-0 seed bead and a 3x2 crystal and a 15-0 seed bead, like this. And I am now coming out of this bead right here. I'm going to go into the opposite side of that bead with these 3 beads, pull them down so that they make a little loop around that bead, just like this. And I want to make sure that I get it tightened enough to where my crystal is peeking up and my 2 little 15-0s are touching either side of the bead that I'm attaching to. Then I'm going to go into the next bead. So in these units, we're going to be working in kind of a figure 8 as we do our embellishments. So we're going to put one here, one here. We are going to sew through this bead but skip it as far as embellishment goes, and then put an embellishment here, here, here. Go back through this bead and put an embellishment here. So we're working in a figure 8. So we've done this one. We're now going to go into the one next to it. So we're coming out of the 8-0 seed bead we just looped. Now we're going to make another loop in this 8-0 seed bead. So we're going to pick up a 15-0 and a crystal and a 15-0, and we're just going to go into the opposite side of the bead we're coming out of and form a little loop around it, just like this. Now pull those down. They're not going to be arranged great, but you want basically them to be to where the 15-0s are on either side of the 8-0. And then once you have that, just like that, I need to get in camera here, sorry about that. We are now going to go through this center bead here. So like I said, we're working in a figure 8. So we've come here, here. We're going through this bead, but we're not putting anything on it, and we're going to go up through this bead here. And we're going to put a loop on that bead. So we're going to pick up a 15-0 and then a crystal, a 15-0, and go into the opposite side of the bead we're coming out of. Now everything's kind of floppy and weird at this point, so just be patient, be slow about it. It's okay, you can take your time and just make your little loop there. Now we're going to go into the bead here on the top, and we're going to pick up a 15-0, a crystal, and a 15-0, and go into the opposite side of the bead we're coming out of. Okay, so in this one unit of right angle weave, we still have one more bead to go through. So we're going to go through this bead right here and make our loop. So we're going to pick up a 15-0, a crystal, and a 15-0, and we're going to go into the opposite side of the bead we are coming out of, right here. Okay, so now let me arrange this just so you can see it. So I have my 4 8-0 seed beads right here, and then my next unit right here. So I have finished the 3 beads on the top of this unit. I go through the bottom bead here, because we never put an embellishment on that one, we just travel through it. Then I have put one here and here on the 3 top beads of this unit, but I don't have one on this side. So I'm coming out of this bead, I'm now going into this bead here. And I'm going to pull my thread through. and I'm going to make a loop. So I'm going to pick up a 15-0, a crystal, and a 15-0 and go through that bead. Just like this. Now, I'm just going to kind of gather all these up towards the top, like this. Now, we're coming out of this 8-0 seed bead right after putting this one on. So in order to get to the top of these beads and join them together, we need to go through the 15-0 of this set. So we're coming out here of this 8-0, we're going up into this 15-0 here. Come on, needle. Just like that. I'm going to hold on to it and pull my thread through, just so I don't pull my whole thing out of whack. Then I'm going to go through this top crystal right here. Now, in order to get a nice cinch on that, I'm going to give a little tug. That way there's no slack in my thread. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go from crystal to crystal to crystal. So I'm just pushing them all up on top. That one fell on the bottom. I'm going to go from crystal to crystal to crystal to crystal. So from this crystal to this one, and I'm going to pull my thread through. Then I'm going to go through the next crystal. And I know it looks like a big blob here, but you'll see it organized as I sew through it. Just keep track of where you're at and what crystal you need to go through next. Go through this one. Give a little tug after each one so that your thread is nice and tight. Go through the next one. Now we're going to go through this bottom one here. And then into the one we started in right here. And I'm going to go ahead and go through the one behind it too, because I'm going to sew through one more time anyway. Now I've got these all pulled up. What I like to do is just take something blunt, and as you can see, sometimes, oops, sorry about that, sometimes these little seed beads, the little 15-0s, kind of stick towards the inside, so I just kind of push them to the outside at this point. Then as I tighten my crystals, they will stay to the outside. So now I'm going to just sew through my crystals one more time. So I'm going to go through this one and just sew all the way through again so that I have a nice tight little flower on top here. Okay, so now if I can get closer, I'm not sure that I can, I want you to turn it to the side and you will see that there's a 15-0 kind of up between the crystals. Ignore that one and go through the 15-0 that's kind of down below it, right here. And then into the 8-0 seed bead right next to that. So you're in this unit that you put the 11-0 on. And this is what your little unit should look like. Now we're going to sew down to this bottom bead so we can make our next one. So this unit right here we're going to anchor to, but we're not going to do anything else with it. So we're going to go into this bead here, and we're going to make 3 more units of right angle weave. So we're going to pick up this one and we're going to go through it. Now we'll make 3 because we're working through 3 units. This unit that's here is no longer counted in our 3. We're counting from here now. So we're going to go through and secure these 3 we just put on. And I see a problem already. This 8-0 is way too weird shaped and it's going to mess up my weave. So I'm going to pull that out and get rid of it. Sorry about that, but if I don't do that, my weave will be all weird looking and I don't want it to be. So again, I pulled all those 3 off, so I'm going to put 3 more on and go into the opposite side here. Just like this. And now I'm going to sew through it. I'm going to back off just a little so I actually stay in camera here. and I'm just sewing back through all of the beads that I put on, and then back up through the one I'm connecting to. So I've gone through those 3 and back into my connecting bead here. Right there. And now I have my first unit. I need to sew through this bead and this bead to get down to the bottom to make my next unit. So I'm going to sew in here, sew here, and now I can pick up 3 more 8/0 seed beads and go through the opposite side of the bead I'm coming out of and pull this down and secure it again. So I'm going to sew through all 3 of these beads until I get back to the bead that I'm connecting to and sew through it. Just like that. Straighten out my beads so I have a nice neat little unit. And they'll mess up a million times. You'll just have to keep straightening them out. It helps if they're laying nice and neat. It just helps you see what's going on a little better. So now we're going to go to the bottom bead because we're in the connecting bead. So now we need to make 1 more unit because we're going to make 3 units of right angle weave. Now remember, this one we're not counting anymore except for the very bottom bead of it that makes your first unit here. Now we're going to go into this one and we're going to make 1 more unit of right angle weave. That big fat bead keeps trying to jump on my needle. There's another one. Tohos are usually pretty even, but every now and then you come across a few that are just messed up. So there's my 3rd unit. I am now going to sew back around it to secure it, 1 bead at a time. If I can get my needle in my hand correctly here, and sew around each one. And the reason I hold on to it in between each stitch is so that I can give a nice little tug and keep everything from getting all rearranged as I pull my thread through. Now I'm going to go from this bead to this bead so that I'm in the bottom of this last unit and I can work my way back up to the 2 previous units. So now I'm going to go into this bottom bead and I'm going to pick up an 11/0 seed bead and just go from this bead here into the opposite on the opposite side in a diagonal stroke here. So this way, just like this, and pull this little 11/0 seed bead right over the top, just like that. Now I am going to make a loop on this bead right here. So I'm going to pick up a 15/0, a crystal, and a 15/0. And I'm going to go into the opposite side of the bead I'm coming out of. At this point, you want to make sure this one gets pretty tight because it will also pull that 11/0 embellishment down nice and tight. So now we're going to work in our figure 8. We've got this one. We're going to do this one with a loop. We're going to sew through this one, do a loop here, do a loop here, do a loop here, sew through this one, and then do a loop here. So now we are coming out of this 8/0, we have to go into this one right here. And we'll make our little loop. So we'll pick up a 15/0, a crystal, and a 15/0, and go into the opposite side of that bead right there. Now, to work our way up and not have to sew through all kinds of beads to come back, we are just going to, we have this bead and this bead in our 4 unit. We're going to sew through this one right here. Tighten everything up, make sure that last embellishment is tight, and then we're going to go into this side bead. So this bead that connects the 2 units, we're just going to sew through. We're never going to put an embellishment on it. Then we are going to pick up a 15/0, and a crystal and a 15-0, and we're going to go into the opposite side of that bead and make a loop around it with our beads. Pull this down, pull it tight, and then we have to go into this bead that is the bottom bead in the unit that we put the 11-0 on. So we're going to go into that one, pull our existing loop nice and tight, and then pick up a 15-0, a crystal, and a 15-0, and go into the opposite side of that bead. Okay, so now if you look close, you can see that I have the middle bead that I sewed through right here, but I don't have anything on this bead. So we need to do this bead right here. So we're going to go into it. We're coming out of the bead here, the 8-0. So we go into this one. Pull that last embellishment tight. Pick up a 15-0 and a crystal and a 15-0 and go into the opposite side of this bead. Pull this down, and now if I separate my 2 units, get you in close, you can see that my next bead right next to the one I'm coming out of is this center bead between the 2 units, the 2 original squares. We're going to go through that center bead. And now on our first unit we started in, we have 1 bead left besides our center bead, and the center bead of course is going to be naked, but this bead right here needs a loop. So all 3 beads on both sides of both units will have loops. The one right in the middle of the 2 units will not. So we're going to go into this one right here and make our last loop. So I'm going to pick up a 15-0, a crystal, and a 15-0, and then I'm going to go into the opposite side of this loop right here. Pull this down. This is what I have. Now I have to sew up this 15-0 and into this crystal so that I can sew all my crystals together. So I'm going to go up into this little 15-0 right here, just like this. As I come up, I'm going to give a little tug, then I'm going to go through the crystal and give a little tug just to make sure that that embellishment is nice and tight. So we're going to go through this crystal right here. And I'm holding on to it so I can give it a tiny tug. Make sure that my unit is nice and tight, like this. And then I can go from this crystal to this crystal right here and start to sew around and push the beads forward. Now those little 15-0s may want to come into the center. Just push them towards the outside. Once we get them all hooked together, we can push them all back out. So we're coming out of this bead here. We're going to go into this one. Make sure that your thread actually goes straight over through the next bead and doesn't get hung up. We're going to go into this one now. Pull it tight. Then we're going to go into the next one here. And then into this one here. And then into the one we started in, and we will be all the way around. I'm just going to ignore that little 15-0. It wants to be in my way. I'm just going to ignore it, go into the crystal here, and pull my thread through. Just like that. Now, the 15-0s are kind of in my way, so I'm just going to kind of push them out. I'm just using my scissors put together so that it's blunt and I can just kind of push that out. You can use anything to push it out with. And then I'm going to sew all the way around one more time. So I'm going to sew up into the next crystal and then into the next one, just pulling these crystals together all the way around. And when I get into this bottom one, try to get you as close as I can here, you will see there's a 15-0 here and there's a 15-0 right here. I want to go down into this 15-0 here. You'll see it when it's in your hand which one is actually going to lead you down into your previous unit. So then we go into the 8-0. Oops, that's the 11-0. Sorry guys. Duh. We're going to go into the 8-0 here in the original unit. So it's kind of tucked down under the crystals there. Go there. Don't sew through that 11-0 on top. You'll get some kind of weird thing. I don't know what it will look like, but probably not good. Then we're going to go into this one here. And then into this one here. And we'll do one more complete unit so that you can see exactly how it's done, and then you can just back up the camera if you need to do the rest of them. But this is repetitive at this point. This is what our little units look like. So now we are coming out of this bottom bead right here. We need to make 3 more units of right angle weave. So we don't count this one as our first one. This one we're basically skipping. We're just using the first bead in it to be part of our first unit. So we're going to pick up 3 8-0 seed beads and go into the opposite side of the bead you're coming out of, pull them down, and then sew back through them one at a time to arrange them into a nice neat little right angle weave unit. And I'm just going to sew through each one and then back into the one I'm connecting to. Then I have to sew down to the bottom bead so I can make another one. So I'm going to go into this side bead and then the bottom bead. Then I'm going to make another unit of right angle weave. So I need to make 2 more units. I have my first one now. So I pick up 3 beads, go into the opposite side, pull them down, and then reinforce it. And back into my connecting bead. So down to the bottom bead in the unit, like this, and make 1 more unit. Pick up 3 8-0 seed beads and go into the opposite side of the bead you're coming out of. Pull this down and again sew through all of the beads to reinforce them. So here, here, here. I'm in the connecting bead. And now I'm going to sew down to this bottom bead so I can put on my little embellishment on the top and then work up the 2 units above it. We'll get in a little bit closer again for this part. Hopefully I stay in camera. Now I'm going to go down into this side bead here. And I'm going to go into this very bottom 8-0 here. And I'm going to pick up an 11-0 seed bead. And then I'm going to cross over into the opposite bead on the opposite side in a diagonal motion and pull that 11-0, give a little tug so that it lodges in there nicely, and now I'm coming out of my first 8-0 seed bead that I will start my loops on. We'll put a loop here, we'll put a loop here, we'll sew through here, put a loop here, 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 sew through here, and put a loop here. So we're working in a figure 8 motion here. So let's pick up our first one, 15-0, and crystal and 15-0, go into the opposite side of the bead you're coming out of. Then go into the next bead right next to where your thread is coming out of the previous bead, right here, and pick up a 15-0 and a crystal and a 15-0 and go into the opposite side. Pull this down, make sure it's nice and tight, and then go into the center bead between the two units here. Sew through that one, and then you'll sew up into the side bead here. And we're going to pick up a 15-0, a crystal, and a 15-0, and go into the opposite side of the bead we're coming out of. See if I got my thread crossed. No, I guess it's just the reflection on the bead. We'll go into the opposite side here. And then we're going to go into the bead we're connecting to. The connecting bead of this unit, I guess you would call it. And then we're going to pick up a 15-0, a crystal, and a 15-0, and go into the opposite side of this bead. And pull this down. Now we have to connect to this bead right here. So we're going to go into this one. So we will have covered all 3 beads on the top of this unit. The top I'm considering closest to the bead we've connected to. So we're going to pick up here, 15-0, crystal, 15-0, and go into the opposite side of this bead. Then go into the center bead between the 2 units, just like this. Now we have put on 3 crystals on this side. We're coming through the center bead. We now have to put on our 3rd crystal on this first unit because we only have 2. So now we're right here where we can do that. And we will pick up a 15-0, a crystal, come here crystal, and a 15-0. And then we're going to go into the opposite side of this bead, right here, and pull this down. Now, we have to sew up this little 15-0 and into the crystal. So we're going to go up 15-0, and then we're going to go into the crystal and the crystal behind it, just like this. And start sewing around all of the crystals. So we'll go into the next one. Just ignore those 15-0s. If they're kind of in a weird way, just push them towards the outside and just ignore them and go through just the crystals. Things will straighten out and get organized as you do this. And you can see I just kind of push my 15-0s out of the way. Go into the next crystal. Make sure I didn't get through that 15-0 there. No, I didn't. So it'll be fine. And then go into this one here. Okay, come here, crystal. Right there. Now I have to connect to the one I started in, right here. And pull this tight. Now I can push those little 15-0s. They just get they kind of just push themselves towards the center, and you just push them back out towards the outside, and then they'll go in place. Then we're going to go into this crystal and sew all the way back again, all the way around. So I'm in that crystal there, go into this crystal, and just kind of organize as I sew through. Oops, oopsie poopsie. And then into this one. And then you have to identify which 15-0 you're going to sew through here. One just naturally navigates towards the top of the crystals. It kind of goes between them, and one's kind of towards the bottom. You go into that bottom 15-0. And then into the 8-0. So if I turn it over, you can see my unit. I'm going to go into the 8-0 between the units here. So under the crystal, into that first 8-0 seed bead in that unit. Make sure everything looks good. And then I'll go into this 8-0 here and this 8-0 here and continue making 3 more units of right angle weave, putting my 11-0 on, making the loops, pulling the crystals together for a flower, and then continue. So if you need to, just back up the video and continue making these units until you have 11 units. Now I'm only counting the flowers. I'm not counting the little 8-0 or right angle weave units in between. So I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You get the point. I have 11 units, and then I have, of course, made my last right angle weave unit, because you make that as you're making your entire weave here. So we're coming out of this one on the bottom here, and we are going to, I want you to see what they look like with the camera straight on instead of kind of tilted. They're really cute little units. This is what the back looks like. Turns out really cute. Now we're going to sew into, make sure you're coming out of this very last 8-0 seed bead on your very last unit here, and we're going to pick up 2 11-0 seed beads and 2 8-0 seed beads. Now I have a 6.5 inch length here. I'm hoping, measuring from about halfway through my toggle, and I am hoping to get around a 7-inch bracelet, which can be a little bit tight on me, so I'm picking up 2 8-0s to give me just a tad bit more length. So you can pick up 1 8-0 if you'd like, but you need 2 11-0s, an 8-0, possibly 2. And then we're going to pick up our clasp and go through the loop. Then we're going to go through both 8-0s if you have 2 of them here, or just 1 if you have 1, and pull your clasping down. Now we're going to pick up 2 11-0 seed beads and go into the opposite side of the bead we're coming out of here. This also narrows everything down a lot with the 2 8-0s so that your clasping slides through the round toggle end better. So the straight end of the toggle can be kind of resistant if it's wide. So I'm narrowing it down to go through easier. So now I have all of my beads on here. I'm going to go up through the 2 11-0s on this side, the 2 8-0s, and up into the clasp loop. Then I'm going to come back down and come into the 2 8-0s, the 2 11-0s on this side now. Make sure you get them both. One's being squirrely. And then we're going to go into this 8-0. Now go ahead and do that 2 more times. We'll come back and tie this off and we'll be finished. Okay, so now I have reinforced my clasping and I'm coming out of this 8-0 on the top of this little right angle weave unit, and we're going to tie this off. Now I went ahead and measured this, and this with my second 8-0 seed bead on the top here comes out to be a 7-inch bracelet. Now it's going to be different it's going to vary with the size of your clasping too. So what I have made that will work perfectly for the length I want may need to be modified for what you're working with. So that being said, let's go ahead and tie this off and see what it looks like on the wrist. So I'm coming out of this 8/0 seed bead right here. I'm going to go underneath the thread bridge between these two 11/0s and this 8/0. So these two in a set and this one. And I'm just going right underneath that thread bridge that connects those beads. And then I'm going to create a loop, go through that loop, and pull my thread down between this 11/0 and this 8/0, right there on that thread bridge. Then I'm going to go into this 8/0 seed bead. I'm going to turn my work over and I'm going to sew through this first right angle weave unit that my flowers are on. So I'm going to go into here and then into this one. And now I'm going to go down into this one with the start of my flower here. And then into this one. So I'm just kind of sewing through in my original thread path and not crossing any threads or anything. And I'm going to go between these two beads right here. And I am going to create a loop and tie a knot on the thread that connects those beads right here. Pull that down, then I can sew up into this one, and I can sew over into this one, and just sew around this unit one more time, maybe go down into the unit underneath it, and cut it off. You can tie knots between these beads anywhere you want, as long as it's down on the thread bridge between the beads. If you feel like you need more than a couple knots. And I'm just going to go down into this one and then into this center one here, and I'm going to cut my thread off right here. Now I already burned down the tag I had left on my other side of my bracelet. So I've left a decent sized little tag here, and I'm just going to get my thread or my flame close to it and just melt it in. Just like that. So it makes a blob right into that bead and actually creates another little knot. Now I have my cute little bracelet, cute little flowery thing, and I'm going to put it on so that you can see what it looks like on the wrist. And it is exactly a 7-inch bracelet. It works really well here. Fits me nice, has good movement. This is what the little units look like. It really, really turns out cute. And back off just a little so you can kind of get the gist here. And then here's my clasping. This is what my clasping looks like. You can also start your bracelet with your right angle weave unit that just has an 11/0 on it. So if you see, I ended this side with that unit, but on this side I started my flower on the first unit. So you could make a unit with your 11/0 seed bead and then ignore it and make your 3 units, put another 11/0 on the bottom, and then make your flower. And then you would have an additional 8/0 unit here if you need just a little bit more length. You can just make more units. If you need more length, you can make a couple of them on this end that are just blank. If you don't have, or with just the 11/0, if making an entire 3 unit is too long, then you can just make another plain unit here. So you can put a plain unit with the 11/0 here and a plain unit here and 2 if you want, whatever, so that you can make a little bit more length also. So this is what this turns out like. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I do have some 2x3 crystals on my website if you would like to get some or just find some in your stash and go for it. This turns out really cute. I really like it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.